Kia ora and welcome to the Silly Kiwi Millennial Podcast, where myself, Scotty from South Auckland, is joined by the also Connor, Big Cons, and I am currently in Chile. Connor is currently in the Netherlands, Europa styles. So we just thought we'd do a podcast to share our experiences, add some commentary on the funky matters going down in Aotearoa, and just share our experiences of travelling, of enjoying the world, offer some context and perspective for those back in Aotearoa, and hopefully inspire people like ourselves from South Auckland or Pacific Island people, or just young people in general to see the world, or if you can't see the world, if that's not capable or if that's not possible, just have a different perspective and spread the love, spread the positive vibrations. Mr. Big Cons, what's crack-a-lackin' over in the Netherlands, bruh?
Hey man, all good. It's cold, probably as cold as New Zealand was in winter, but it's not quite winter yet, so not looking forward to the very, very cold, real winter that they experience over here.
We'll get on to some experiences that we're rolling through in a jiffy, and we've got plenty of time, so we've got plenty of time to chew the fat, as they say. But we've got a bit of a situation back in Aotearoa. We're recording this prior to the day of the Samoa versus Tonga situation, Rugby League World Cup. A little bit of a footy game going down in the Waikato. So regardless of the result and regardless of the actual on-field action, the situation leading up to the game hasn't been overly positive. And for me, it impacts me because I'm from South Auckland, so a lot of the stuff is happening in Otahu or Otara, neighbourhoods in South Auckland. And Big Cons, you are Samoan yourself. So can you explain what, I grew up around Samoans and Tongans. I know all about the rivalry. I know all about the situation. But can you put some context around what makes this rivalry and this relationship between Samoan and Tongans so fierce, and what makes them showcase their pride, perhaps to such an extreme that it's such negative? Can you just explain why there's so much pride in these countries and your opinion on why that goes to an extreme level?
Yeah, well, first of all, my dad is from Samoa. I'm only half Samoan on that side, and I actually have Tongan and Māori heritage on my mum's side, as well as being European. Yeah. So, just intrinsically, I am bound to see from both perspectives a lot of the time. But Samoa and Tonga, it's probably more the idea and the rivalry that has existed for centuries. It goes back to when Tonga ruled the Pacific, and then the Samoans finally figured out how to defeat them and free themselves. It took them 100 years or something. But anyway, that was in the past. There's so many Samoan and Tongan families in New Zealand now. It was inevitable that when you come to a bigger place, you leave your islands, you end up mixing. That's why and I guess the islands, especially Tonga, they're a really proud people. They don't come from, the populations of Samoa and Tonga. I think Samoa's less than 200,000, and that's bigger than Tonga. So there's not a lot of people there, and it comes back to this idea I have about population theory. So many things are just relative to population. They don't have a lot of representation here in New Zealand. So when something good happens, or not even good, just something positive, a national rugby league side, the Tongans, go crazy, and they just whip out all the flags, dress up in red, parade down the street, middle of the street. And, it's just a way for them to express how proud they are of their country. And then Samoans being Samoans, I don't know, there's this funny thing with Samoans, not all of them, I'm generalizing, but when it comes to the islands, Samoa thinks they're the top island, they're above all the other islands. And so it's kind of like a masculinity thing, but not masculinity. Like, you know, they just have this thing where we're the best island, and so like when they see Tonga out or celebrating and stuff, they're like, oh, we need to celebrate too, and then try to outdo them. And then someone says something smart, and someone's got a short temper, and then we're burning flags, and people are having fights, even at schools. Like, it's like, also, I guess being from South Auckland and like from poorer backgrounds, like Pacific Islanders, like, you know how like people want to be in gangs in South Auckland. I don't know a lot about that, but like it's sort of that sense of belonging and belonging to something cool, something, you know, that you can be proud of, and that's belonging to your island, like where you came from or where your parents came from. So, you know, they just get obsessed with that idea that, you know, I gotta be mate ma Tonga, like die for Tonga, or like go super toa Samoa on everyone. Like, I don't know, man. It's a I guess a unique situation to New Zealand, but yeah, it's a little bit redundant though, because so many Samoans are Tongans, or they, you know, Tongans are Samoans, or they have relatives from all different islands throughout the Pacific and New Zealand. So, you know, no one's fully Tongan versus a fully Samoan squad. Like, there's like players playing who have played for Samoa and Tonga who could have represented both in the past, as well as New Zealand or Australia. So like, as the world's become more globalized and everyone's sort of, you know, come together as a people in the first world, like, you know, in the modern world, everyone's sort of homogenized together. So I don't really know what I'm trying to say with this. What do you reckon?
No, but that idea of belonging to a tribe, and that's not just a Samoa Tonga thing. Like, a tribe in high school is the emo kids, or the tribe
exactly.
in high school is the jocks. Like, everyone just wants to belong to a group, and a gang, in a sense of a gang of people, like a group of people. So
Yeah.
when you extrapolate that out to some national pride, then it escalates to a whole new level. And it is weird because, like, we all grew up, you know, Samoans are friends with Tongans.
Yeah.
And outside of the Rugby League World Cup, the only drama between Samoans and Tongans is Tongans are usually Crips and Samoans are usually Bloods. So there's like a gang situation there. But other than that, they're all homies. They're all kicking it.
Exactly.
And it's not like it's not like a prison where you're kind of segregated by your nationality. No, like at high school, your group of mates, there's a whole mix of ethnicities and cultures. So it's kind of like that rivalry only extends in the streets. Obviously, in a sporting sense, it's like any time a sporting event rolls around.
Yeah.
But in the streets, it only comes around when that sporting event rolls around. So it's really dumb. Like, it just doesn't make sense, because like you are probably really good mates with the people you're fighting. Like, that could be a genuine situation. Or you're going to go back home and go to school the next day, and you're going to shake hands, you're going to dap up your Samoan friend if you're Tongan. So it's like, none of that really makes sense. And it's really frustrating, because then it gives the media and people who look down on South Auckland, or people who look down on Pacific Islanders,
or just don't understand,
more ammunition to continue to look down on, to justify their opinions, to justify their weird stereotypes in their head. So it's like, you're not only, obviously you're not helping the situation, but you're also making the entire situation a whole lot worse. And I think like it also points to a lack of just opportunities, or a lack of opportunities to really get a lot of testosterone out of your system, because this is, you know, what a lot of them have been waiting for to some extent. Like, this is what they want. They want to be antagonized. Like, if you're a Samoan or a Tongan, you may want to see someone burning your flag, because then it gives you an opportunity to get rid of some testosterone, have a scrap, have a fight, and you know, make your mark to be a man, I guess. Whereas, like, if you had other avenues, if you were releasing testosterone on a daily basis and putting your mind to work, putting your body to work, you may not react in such an aggressive way when something like, it's so trivial. Like to me, like if I see someone burning an Aotearoa flag, I'm like, okay, you're a bit crazy, but like each to their own. Like I don't like, I guess this is going back to the population size, like Kiwis, Aotearoa, like we have the most population of the Pacific Islands, so it's like we're, of the Pacific Islands, like our pride is probably at the bottom of that ranking. So it's like, okay, like you're burning my flag, you're a bit of a weirdo, like you're a bit of a loser for doing that, but okay. And instead of reacting with straight anger, reacting with like volatile nature. But I think when you are unable to release all that anger or testosterone, that fuse is a lot shorter than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, I agree with some of that. There's also like you said about population, it is so small. The flag represents a lot more and holds a lot more value in these Pacific Island cultures, especially, becoming independent, like recognized as their own countries, was a big deal, and that's what the flag represents. They don't have a Union Jack or, something that shows that they were colonized and, they were part of something. Like, it's a real, like a pride thing. So, to some people, burning the flag is just burning the flag, but to them it sounds a bit American and patriotic, but it's kind of true. You are sort of like, disrespecting their freedom and their independence, like just shitting on it. So it's a real, yeah. But of course, there's only a couple of individuals that need to be, extremists and burn the flag, and then people, or just people not even thinking burning the flag, and then people react, thinks that gives them an excuse to be a fucking idiot. But there's not heaps for Pacific Islanders to like hold on to and hold pride or treasure nowadays, or at least that the media gets to see. So, when something like that happens, irrationally they react, not, they turn back to 100 years ago or whenever, that they weren't free, or, and I don't know, it's a different thing. Like, as well as New Zealanders as a people aren't as overtly patriotic about the country or the flag. Like in Australia, they got flags everywhere, and it's like Australia Day. Like there's no New Zealand Day. It's Waitangi Day. So like New Zealand's, even like with tall poppy, like, no one really likes to make a fuss in New Zealand. So it's sort of foreign when Pacific Islanders act all crazy about being Tongan or being Samoan or even being Fijian or whatever, that it's foreign to New Zealanders who aren't as obviously, overtly or like explicitly patriotic about being a New Zealander. It's a cultural thing too. It's just different.
I guess that like most of the media and most of the people who look down on this sort of situation are just New Zealanders, Kiwis. So it's like they can't wrap their head around like why are you fighting because of a rugby league game? Like, whereas the Kiwis were like, I think what I said before about, okay, you're burning the flag, bro, whatever, like you're a weirdo. Like that kind of sums up the Kiwi patriotism and the Kiwi pride. Whereas that like perspective is now looking upon this crazy situation where you've got not even just the negative, like you've got all the positive stuff where it's like a celebration in the streets of South Auckland, where all the pride is being shown overtly, where the perspective that is broadcasting that is coming from the kind of tall poppy, mellow Kiwi pride perspective. So that's a bit weird as well.
So just, yeah, it's that whole pride thing, how people sort of struggled to comprehend like what it means to play for Samoa or Tonga or Fiji. Like, even though you were born in New Zealand or were born in Australia, there's just something that unless you're from there, you'll never experience that pride or desire or passion to play from that country, for that country. Like, yeah, it's, you can understand it, like, I guess you could try and explain it logically to a person who's not from the islands, but they'll never fully grasp what it means to be from the islands or have parents from the islands. And yeah, that's sort of why I guess New Zealanders sort of struggle to understand why islanders go all crazy about, you know, a rugby game or something. But in saying that, in the past, New Zealanders have gone crazy about rugby games, you know, sport.
Yeah, we just go about it in a
Yeah.
fucking weird way. Just bitch and moan, and we don't like
Yeah.
show it, we just bitch and moan. But I would like, if you took that situation and put it into like a regional New Zealand province where you've got young men, and those young men would have an equally short fuse. And you see it all the time, whether it's through alcohol, whether it's through gangs, whether it's through just any other reason. So it also points to like a societal problem where young men in Aotearoa just don't have the opportunities to release all that pent-up energy, and so all that pent-up energy comes out in the form of irrational violence, as it has as here. So it's like when you combine the pride and that situation, then you get this. But if you put this situation into like regional Aotearoa, I reckon you get a pretty similar response from young men who don't have a whole lot to do.
That's true. I feel like it's definitely improved, like issues around masculinity in New Zealand, and we have gone forward from the past of, you know, a lot of frustrated rugby men and or farm men or something, I don't know, but like we've moved forward and there's not as much senseless, you know, fighting between people, but there's still, New Zealand always has that unspoken like underbelly of issues throughout the country that no one really wants to acknowledge and sort of just sweep under the rug. And I don't know, that's a frustrating thing about New Zealanders, you know. Too much of the she'll be right. It's been taken way too far from, you know, what it originally meant, that you can just sort of ignore every problem if it's not that bad and it'll go away. How bad does something need to get before New Zealanders are willing to address it, acknowledge it, and then fix it? It's a frustrating dilemma that I feel a lot of New Zealand sort of just accepts that that's the way it is.
What's your, like, I'm interested in the history of the Pacific Islands, so I'm not sure what your knowledge is, but you said that Tonga was once the kingdom of the Pacific Islands, and I know that Germany used to have a presence in Samoa, so like, can you just break down any of the history that you know of the Pacific Islands? Because I think a lot of Kiwis and like people like myself, we just think, oh, Samoa and Tonga have just been there for as long as they've been there, and they've just existed, and they haven't really had many situations. But like, hearing that Samoa had to get independence from Tonga, that kind of like paints a whole different portrait of the Pacific Islands.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that statement was a bit out of context. Samoa gained independence in 1965. I don't know. You need to check that. There's a lot of, yeah. If you listen to this, please don't take everything 100% true, but this is the general idea. So Tonga ruled the Pacific ages ago. This was, I'm pretty sure, it's the Kingdom of Tonga now, but that's based on the British influence and creating a monarchy in their own country. But Tonga ruled the Pacific, which is stronger than, I don't know, maybe they had a bigger army, or they were a fierce people anyway. This is back in their, like, sort of when Māoris were like warring against other tribes within New Zealand. And it took the Samoans, I think, 100 years to, this is the story, is that Samoans invited the Tongans over for a feast on one of the beaches in Samoa, you know, fed them, gave them kava and whatever, gave them a big feast and just got them all drunk and tired and, full. And then the Samoans had hidden all their weapons in the sand, and they, once the Tongans were vulnerable, I guess this is the royalty or the monarchs or the chiefs, and they dug up their weapons from the ground and basically slaughtered them and freed themselves from the Tongan reign. And it's even in one of the Samoan hakas, I think, the Sivatau. It's the action where it looks like they're sweeping the ground and then they're picking up their weapons. It dates back to that story, I'm pretty sure. And so Germany did occupy Samoa. I guess could colonize Samoa, and I think after the First World War, they handed it over to New Zealand because it was so far away and there's not really much they could afford to give to a little island in the middle of the South Pacific. So New Zealand took governorship of Samoa and led it through till Samoa eventually gained independence in the mid-1900s. And I'm not sure how the Germans got there, because they're also missionaries throughout all the Pacific Islands, and that's where the strong religious part of Pacific Islanders come from, where all the missionaries that came to the islands and spread the word of God. Because just logically, I'm like, how would anyone in the Pacific Islands know about Jesus and stuff going on in like Jerusalem or wherever, like Israel? How would a little tiny island with a tiny population know about Jesus? So obviously through the missionaries, but I'm just like, man, they had some influence, especially with the English language in the islands, and just, I guess, translating it to their native tongue, but just getting them to believe in the powers of God and all that. But the religious debate is for another podcast, I think.
But that's the thing, is when you think of Samoans and Tongans and Fijians, you think of how important the church and Christianity like whatever sect or whatever it is, you just automatically think of how important that is to their culture. So that is pretty crazy. But Tonga has been like kind of independent that whole time. So Samoa they had to get independence from Tonga and then get independence from, well, not independence from Germany, but then through Germany and Aotearoa they had to get independence from those countries as well, whereas Tonga has kind of been their own entity that time as well?
I think they would have been, are they part of the Commonwealth? I'm pretty sure they've always had their nickname is the Friendly Islands, Tonga. That's what they're affectionately called, maybe by Captain Cook, I'm not sure. But they've had a British influence. I think that can be seen in their use of concrete. I don't know, because they got walls on their houses, whereas in Samoa, the traditional Samoan whale doesn't have walls, it's just a roof. And that's, I guess, why Tongans are really good concreters, because they make houses out of concrete in Tonga. I don't know, I know more about Samoa than I do about Tonga. So don't get upset if I've said something to offend any Tongans. And the independence thing, it's not really an independence thing like, a proclamation or something, like, people of government. It's just like a tribal thing, a native thing, where we're the strongest tribe, we're in control, like, of your island. And then sort of like, okay, Samoa rose up and they said, no, fuck yous, we can look after ourselves, we're strong. And then, I guess, to prevent further bloodshed between the islands, Tonga just let Samoa do its own thing. And Samoa didn't get any more greedy.
Last thing on the Pacific Islands, because being here in Chile, it's been weird for me, because Easter Island is part of Chile, and so I think it's the called Rapa Nui, and so they're effectively Polynesians. Like, they're the same. They got they do haka. They I'm pretty sure if I went there and I was like, kia ora, haere mai, like, they might understand me. Like, they're effectively the same people.
Yeah.
So the idea of just like, I've been thinking a lot of the migration of Polynesians and how that all came about. And when you like, Easter Island is just so far east of Tonga, Samoa, Cook Islands, Niue, Aotearoa, and you really start to, and obviously like they're slightly different to I think it's the Micronesians or Melanesians, so Fiji, Solomon Islands, but just how far reaching their kind of exploration was. So there has been a few things said about different vegetables and how the Polynesians picked up different vegetables. I think the sweet potato was one that could hint at them starting or coming from South America. So that's first been like pretty weird for me being in South America right now. But that because they carried a lot of vegetables and traditional, fruits and vegetables that came from South America and made their way into the diet of Polynesian culture. But then you ponder that with the fact that Polynesians did make their way to Easter Island. So it's like just thinking of the idea of like how Polynesians came down from Hawaii. Did they come down from Hawaii and then stretch out to Easter Island? Or somewhere along the line, did they come from South America and pass through Easter Island to go to Hawaii? Like just the whole path of Polynesian culture and the heritage has been a bit of a trip, because Easter Island is a territory of Chile where I am. So it's I've always been interested in the Māori and Polynesian, and they're dating back as far as my kind of imagination can go. So being in a country where they have a territory that is like there's no connection between Chileans and Polynesians other than Easter Island is a territory of Chile. Like they've got a weird mix of the local language on Easter Island, which could be similar to Māori, but then it's also like a Spanish territory through Chile, so it's just a whole weird situation. But yeah, pondering the migration from Hawaii or South America throughout the Pacific Islands has been an interesting mental journey.
Yeah, I think there's theories. Yeah, Hawaii, the not mythical, but the place where all Polynesians descended from. Any idea? Was it China or somewhere in Asia that initially started the journey from around that region, and then down through the Pacific Islands, and then I think they did travel to South America as far as the East Islands. Maybe it was the currents, or through in the Pacific Ocean, it was easier to travel that way and then loop back around and eventually end up in New Zealand for the Māoris. Because some cultures in the Pacific Island languages are really similar, but even within that, like Tongan and Niuean is very similar, and Cook Islands, which is essentially real close to Māori, pretty much Māori, but slightly different and with a different accent. So the language, I guess, suggests that idea that over time that they've stopped in places and then a group has moved forward and brought different parts of the languages with them, or maybe different accents, and that's changed as they've gone from island to island. And yeah, it's just something interesting and crazy to think about that. We talk about European settlers and navies and commanding the seas and exploration and traveling great distances to colonize or explore the world, whereas Pacific Islanders have done it for millennia too, but on a much smaller scale, with much less technology, which is really astounding.
Well, even the idea of paddling from Hawaii to Aotearoa, that's ridiculous, let alone paddling from Hawaii to Easter Island. Like the vastness of the ocean in between, and you're on a waka. Like that's all.
Yeah, but they do have outriggers though, and like they did use sails. Like they had knowledge of the winds throughout the ocean and stuff. Like they're not that massive that they could just paddle from an island to an island. Like the sea's way too rough for that. So, they might have tried a few times to paddle, but they did understand the concept of wind and sails, and a lot of it is quite a native thing, sailing, because even if you're not traveling far distances, the ocean is a great source of food and like nourishment. So you needed to get at least far enough out to fish or whale if you're that massive. But yeah, so props to them if they paddled all that way. But I'm pretty sure that they did harness the natural elements,
the vastness of the ocean and the currents, as you said, and then the winds on top of that. Like, how you first of all understand that with no technology, like how you understand that just based on mapping it and talking and communicating is ridiculous, and then being able to execute it, because you can map it out all you want, but it might change at the drop of a hat. So, but that probably led to them going to where they did, because like you might be in the middle of the ocean and then the wind changes unpredicted, and suddenly you end up in Easter Island, whereas you thought you were going to Aotearoa. Like you thought you were going to join your mates in Aotearoa. You've received pigeons from Aotearoa saying, "Well, we've reached the land of the long white cloud. Like it's amazing. There's shit everywhere." And then you're like, "Yeah, let's go." And then suddenly you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and a breeze blows and you're going off to Easter Island. Like that. Executing it would have been like pretty damn difficult as well.
I think there was a lot of trial and error, maybe, and that's also contributes to why they have such small populations, like, as well as I guess relocating every 100 years or whatever. You can't take everyone with you, so a small group goes and then a big group stays, and that's why I just assume a lot of trial and error went on, and some of them, I don't know, were just geniuses or just like prodigies and understood the stars, or like it's like problem solving back in the day. Like you find, like even today, like rudimentary problems, you find something that is fixed that you can work off, and then you build a network in your mind or on paper or wherever from that. And as well as Pacific Island languages being oral languages, not having it written, sort of, I guess, alludes to the fact that they had great memories or great recollection, or songs or strategies, maybe tattoo designs or something, to help them understand the world and record it, because they didn't have a written language. So I guess that was how they managed to navigate the seas, was mentally, because that was the tool they had.
That's like, that's a yarn for another day, because it just blows my mind every time I think about it. Even when like I don't know, I'm the type of person, so I'll look up the stars and then I'll start to think about, wait, Aotearoa was formed by people looking at the stars and then figuring out like where to go, or watching a haka and then thinking of that haka or the formation, the actions of the haka being performed as it would have been performed way back in the day. So how different actions came about to represent different tribes, or like even the Kiwis' first haka, where Brad Takarangi, he did a massive like it was like super high pitch, and I was thinking like on the battlefield that would have been just a terrible noise to hear, because if you're approaching an enemy tribe and you're hearing that, but I mean a sporting haka is pretty civilized, like back in the day it would have been like 50, 60 people making that noise, whether it's high pitched, whether it's a low pitch kind of.
All those stories about the 28th Māori battalion and performing hakas in overseas fighting in the Second World War, and just like the fear they evoked without ever firing a bullet in their enemies, like, you know, it just would have been so foreign to them, and they just sort of thought these people are crazy, you know, they'll do anything, like. And I think I just read an article recently, and it was one of Hitler's like high-ranking military officers. He made it throw a comment, but he was like, if I had a Māori battalion, you know, we would have won this battle that we lost. If I had 3, then we would have taken it, taken out the whole, like, taken victory. Like, they just were so revered during that time as just true warrior people, you know. Once we're warriors.
That's we're warriors. But I was like imagining like a cold and frosty like morning in Aotearoa, and then like 2 tribes are preparing for battle, and you can't, like, there's fog, so you can't see the enemy, and then all you can hear is just like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And just all these roars. Like, that would have been terrifying for a Pakeha person, let alone a person like another Māori tribe member. So I like to put those situations back in history. Like, that's really interesting for me. Even when you're in Aotearoa and you're like rolling through the land is the same as it would have been way back in the day. Like, just pondering how like different tribes would have moved through the land and made their way. Like, this would, like, you can go places and there are still areas in Aotearoa where there's like 10 hangi pits still sitting there, and it's like the land hasn't changed because like Aotearoa's a super young country, and like it just hasn't
oh man, we are so young, but especially being over here.
That's been that's probably been my biggest learning thus far, being in Chile, because again, like with the Māori people, like I think of the Mapuche people, who are the indigenous Chileans here, and they are pretty much in a similar, like, worse than the Australian indigenous. And I've always thought about, you know, Māori people don't have it perfectly compared to like a Pakeha person, but internationally they've got it pretty well compared to indigenous people around the world, because the Mapuche, for example, because Chile, like many other countries, is so much older and got colonized so much earlier by the Spanish people, that systematic breakdown of the indigenous culture has been going on for like much longer. Whereas in Aotearoa, the colonizational breakdown of indigenous culture has only been going on for like 100 years, 150 years. And we're at a point now where Māori culture is still, you know, I think it's thriving. Like, it could be a lot better, but it is thriving compared to other indigenous cultures. And we're at a point where the consciousness is changing and people are more enlightened. So there's an opportunity to not only save Māori culture, but to really reintegrate it into like a, just into Kiwi culture, like a level playing field with European culture, perhaps greater. Whereas in Chile, that opportunity is long gone. And there's the only, you know, you've got bushfires. Like, Chile has major problems with bushfires, which are speculated to be started by the Mapuche people because they just kind of hate everyone. So that disintegration has gone on for much longer, whereas in Aotearoa we have kind of been able to stop that disintegration before it got even close to where it is for the Mapuche. So, and that's just because Aotearoa is young, and like,
yeah,
even the idea of, for me, the other thing has been the food. So in Aotearoa we've got no traditional food. Like, people ask me, what's the traditional dish in New Zealand? And it's like,
British food.
Like butter chicken, like,
from
like just meat and vegetables. Like, we've got nothing. Like, but that's because like the food in Chile, for example, has been around for hundreds of years. Whereas the food, because Aotearoa is so young, our food is based on migration. It's based on, international people coming here and bringing their food here, and we embrace that. So we don't have any signature food. We just eat everyone else's food.
It's weird to think of New Zealand like that, almost like America, like a country full of, immigrants. But it's funny because, if you say that to a New Zealand person, they'll be like, oh no, we've got way more culture than America, But there's an argument that we're basically the same, and the only difference we have is, I guess, because the Māori people maybe stood up stronger against less, because of where New Zealand is, and because of how late it was discovered by the British, Māori always had a stronger chance to survive than, say, the Native American people in America, because it took so long for people to get to New Zealand. No one wanted to come here, I guess. They had to be enticed, So the waves that came to New Zealand, it didn't happen so fast that the Māori were outnumbered, outgunned, outmanned, and then just basically stripped of their land. The Māori, I guess, put up more of a fight as a warring people, but I guess, for New Zealanders, it's just like when I see the All Blacks do the haka and how passionate, Europeans or Kiwis, European New Zealanders, New Zealanders, how passionate they get about the haka and doing it, but it's so borderline tokenism and just for show, as well as selling the image of New Zealand to overseas, as Taika Waititi brought it up, like he's not really proud of New Zealand because, of the issues that we have going on here. And I feel it's the same for the use of the Māori culture and that clean green image of New Zealand that New Zealand tries to sell to the rest of the world. And, we're great, we have great race relations, we have, hardly any poverty, great water, great land, beautiful country, but it's although it's not bad, it's not as good as what people think it is or what people believe New Zealand is, which is pretty shit, to be honest. Especially moving away from New Zealand, it sort of opened up my eyes to the way New Zealand is perceived and then the way I've experienced it. It doesn't help being from Auckland, where the rest of the country hates you, but it's definitely been a revelation moving away and staying away from New Zealand.
That's like, you talk to anyone, and it's like, oh, haka. I love the haka. It's not Lord of the Rings anymore. Like, sure, there's a lot of like Lord of the Rings stuff about Aotearoa, but most people you talk to is haka, and I love the haka, so I can happily sit down for anyone for 2 hours and just watch haka videos on YouTube and like get all nerdy about it and try break it down for a complete amateur. But the image about Aotearoa is strictly based on Māori culture. Like, there's no, even when people say, oh yeah, we've got culture in Aotearoa, well, everything about Aotearoa culture is Māori culture. There's no, there's no like European culture in New Zealand. Although there's some, but it's like internationally, the reputation.
Yeah, what we use to showcase our culture is Māori culture.
So I agree. Like the international representation of Aotearoa compared to the reality I've experienced just isn't like. It doesn't match up, but then like it's that fine line, because Aotearoa, like, even and this can be seen in in how people, the future they want for Māori culture, Māori language, like in Aotearoa we have it fantastic, because the conversation of having, oh, we need more Māori language in our schools, that conversation doesn't happen in other countries. Like even the idea of the indigenous people having their culture in mainstream society does not exist. So we have it really good in New Zealand and so many other matters apart from Māori culture. But then we can also do so much better. And I think that's the foundation on which Kiwi culture is built on, because, yeah, like the Māoris have it pretty good compared to a lot of other indigenous cultures around the world. Like the Māoris are forefront in New Zealand, but that's to the international standard. To my standard, it's not good enough. Like, to my standard as a Kiwi, the clean green image isn't good enough. To my standard as a Kiwi, so I think as Kiwis, our Kiwi culture is based on the idea of holding ourselves to a certain standard. And I think you can get caught up in, because that's what I say, I talk to people in Chile and it's like, yeah, the Māori culture's they're kind of suppressed, language isn't that much used that much. And then they tell me about the Mapuche, and it's like, there's no comparison because you don't see any Mapuche around. You don't see any Chilean indigenous culture. You in the regions you might, but the people tell me Māori have it really good. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but to my standards, to my utopia that I'm trying to work towards, in Aotearoa, it's not good enough. So it's that fine line of being grateful for what we do have, but then trying to strive for our high Kiwi standards. And you can see that recycling. Recycling doesn't exist in Chile. There's no recycling bins. You have to walk with your plastic bottles to some random spot where there's a mass recycling thing. But to my standards, you recycle everything, because I'm from Aotearoa, where we may not have a clean green reality, but the clean green mindset is ingrained in us. So it's to my there's the people say, oh, it's so clean and green in Aotearoa. I say, yeah, compared to your country it is, but that's because I hold it to my standards of recycling everything that I can.
Comparing anything is dangerous territory, and especially New Zealanders, that's the thing. If it, it's not as bad as, when I've had a few conversations with people back home, and they're like, there's no poverty here, there's poverty in Brazil, in Africa, and then it's just at what point, are you allowed to say there's poverty in New Zealand? Where is your measure? How bad does it have to get for you to want to accept it and then do something? There's no, you don't even need it. There's no motivation for Kiwis to try harder, do better. They just sort of take everything at face value. It's all right. And it's a dangerous mindset. And I think that's sort of what's stopped New Zealand moving forward and being the world leaders that we used to be in New Zealand. Even giving women the vote first in the world, and then we've only had 3 female prime ministers just now, and and that was in the last 2 decades that we've had 3 women prime ministers, which is a bit ridiculous for a country that gave women the vote so long ago. And it's kind of we're living on our past glories, and and that we have this entitlement that allows us to say, we're trendsetters, we're the first country to see the light, kind of thing. It's a farce, it's a lie, it's terrible. And because there's a comfortable majority in New Zealand, or a complacent majority in New Zealand, that they're so, I don't know what it is, the generation above us, they're so conservative about their little piece of land that they have, that they're not willing to risk it for expansion or risk it in case they lose something, That's why it's so hard to get through to people who vote. At the end of the day, everyone should vote for themselves. But if you're comfortable, and you're doing well, voting for, your neighbor who's not doing well it's not going to take away from you. Like, there's so many countries, especially around Scandinavia and over here, that they pay really high taxes, but that the taxes, that money you can see on the streets with all these cycle paths, this great public transport system, these trams, like a really decent education, free education. It's capitalism is just fuck capitalism. Like,
So it's
like,
the idea of like, I'm happy to give up my money to help someone else. So that's the essential crux of that idea.
yeah, and the whole thing that it's, you have that mutual understanding that if ever you or your children or, a family member were in trouble, that because you've bought into this idea that, you can help everyone by giving a little bit, if everyone gives a little bit, you can help everyone, that if you ever fell into hard times, that you would be secure, like a safety net. And it's just, giving everyone that equal, security, and I guess that equal footing to start. Everyone starts, with the same good education, and then, you have good access to everything. It's more, just giving people a fairer chance in society.
It's like, because the other weird thing has been like the buses, for example. So I'm in Concepcion in Chile, and the buses, you pay in cash and you get a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
So in Auckland, you have a hop card, you got a little
Yep.
technological wizardry, so you got a little swipe card, and then you jump on the bus. So for the train in Concepcion, sure, you have a swipe card, but for the buses, you pay in cash and you get a little ticket. So in Aotearoa, there's more technology, there's more innovation to that. I don't like, in a broader sense, Aotearoa, there's no innovation, there's no new ideas, there's nothing new, as you've kind of alluded to there. But
Yeah.
in the specific confines of the bus in Auckland, there is technology. But in Auckland, you have to wait. A bus comes at least every 15 minutes, let alone every half hour, and that bus is most likely going to be full because of how infrequently the bus comes, and the buses don't go everywhere, and the buses are real expensive as well. So the buses aren't scheduled very well. The frequency of buses isn't good, and the price isn't good. We're in Concepcion. If you don't have the technology, but you literally wait a max of 5 minutes for a bus, and regardless of where you're traveling in Concepcion, every bus ticket is 450 pesos, so that's about $1, New Zealand dollar. So you don't pay based on how far you're traveling. You can travel to like a nearby city and it's still 450. So the price is the same, and you've got more buses. So the bus service, to my mind, is better. But because Kiwis are comfortable and they like to have their little comfortable luxury, and I need to have, and the buses in Chile, like, they're not as nice they're not as fancy as the buses in Auckland. But if you say to me, I'm going to give you a system where there's more buses coming, there's a greater frequency, and they're cheaper, well, fucking every day I'm going to give up the fancy nature of the buses. So it's a weird situation, but like, yeah, the idea that you have to, that because you have a fancy bus or because you have technology on your bus, that makes it better. No, that's wrong, because many Kiwis would just look at the bus and say, nah, I want to travel in my Kiwi bus. But here, you're just standing on a street corner and a bus comes as soon as you get there, and you're gone.
Yeah.
And you've only had to pay $1 for that bus. So it's like, on the surface level, it may not be better, but as soon as you're in that system, everything about it is better.
Yeah, it's sort of, in New Zealand, it's, health and safety and PC, all these concerns about, having an up-to-date bus kind of thing. But the bus isn't the problem, it's the service. How, like you said, how frequent a bus can come. And it's that whole chicken and the egg scenario. Like, how do you get more people to want to catch the bus in order to provide, a better bus service. So they invest money in getting nicer buses to try and get more people to catch the bus. But at the end of the day, if that bus only comes by, once in an hour, it's just as useless as before. Like it's a frustrating scenario. The cool thing over here in the Netherlands, biking, it really helps that the country's flat and it's so easy to bike everywhere. But the fact that biking, especially in Amsterdam, in the city centre, it's like they're the top dog biking over here. Like cars wait for you, pedestrians wait for you. There's so much encouragement by the government to ride your bike. It's great for you, like the physical and health benefits of it. It's cheap. Like once you get a bike, it costs you next to nothing and a lock, as well as for the environment, like way less emissions and like meaningless space for car parks. There's so much better use for things in the world besides car parking. And the fact that everyone bikes here, there's no stigma around biking. There's probably stigma around not biking. Like everyone bikes, from like CEOs and businessmen, like ladies in heels and dresses and stuff. They'll be on a bike, as well as a kid going to school, or like a factory worker. Like they all ride bikes, which is really cool that everyone's just bought into this idea, and the government and the council have provided bike paths everywhere, like more bike paths than roads. So it's to use the service is a smart thing, and it's encouraged and supported by the governments. That's why they don't enforce wearing a helmet here, because they know if they did that, less people would ride bikes, and that's the exact opposite of what they want to happen. And I guess because it's in their DNA to ride bikes, they're so comfortable and well maneuvered on a bike that there's way less crashes and instances of accidents happening. And I think it's made for they drive really fast in Europe, like way faster than New Zealand. They got, I guess, more road, like longer length of road to traverse, but they're so much more aware. Like even at roundabouts, sometimes the bikers have right of way at roundabouts, so they're constantly checking their blind spots. Drivers are, when they get to a stop sign or a giveaway, or just because they know that their biker could be right there, who's not going to stop and just going to go straight through. And if you hit them, that's your fault as the car driver. So they're just, as well as being on bikes, they're so much more hyper aware of their surroundings. And I guess that's what's happened because it's been around for so long. And I guess if you wanted to bring something like this to New Zealand, there will definitely be a bleeding stage to try and get people used to the idea. And that's where that Kiwi mentality, if it's if it's not broke, don't try and fix it kind of thing. Like why no one wants to bike in New Zealand, or not, people do want to, but the refusal by car enthusiasts, not even enthusiasts, just people who don't want to bike, who want to drive everywhere, why it would just struggle for so long in New Zealand to get by. Like it'll take a lot more initiative and investment from the councils to start providing cycle paths and safer ways for people to travel on bikes. It's a tough thing, and it can sort of, like a lot of things, trying to introduce it to New Zealand can seem a bit hopeless or just pointless, but it needs to start somewhere, which is what New Zealand has really struggled to do. I felt growing up like they don't ever want to invest for a long-term thing because they just see the cost, and that's going to cost so much to do that now. But if you plan that over so many years, and you can see the longer lasting benefits, which will make this huge amount of money you're putting in as an investment, will make it all worth it for the future. There's too much short-term high profits focus, even with the bloody East-West link that they wanted to put through Onehunga, which has now been, I think, denied by the new government. And that whole denial, the whole process of it, the planning and all the campaigning against it in Onehunga, it's cost, I think, like 51 million to the government. Just even to cut it short now, it's already costing 51 million. It's a stupid infrastructural kind of thing to do. But it's, yeah, New Zealanders is still so obsessed with the right now, real impatient, and they don't see the value. Well, some of them do, but often they don't see the value of long term and like big investment now for a long, a much better long term return on things, which I think that over here in Europe they really understand about, building things for the future and building for more population kind of, because New Zealand's got a tiny population and we could fit so many more people in there easily if we had better infrastructure. But you know what Kiwis are like.
Well, it's a simple case of like the baby boomers didn't do any forward thinking for us, let alone the generations after us. So now we're in this situation because the baby boomers embraced all these new technologies, greater population, greater migration, greater money. All this, like, New Zealand kind of hit a boom after the baby boomers, but there was no forward planning for how society would be in 30, 40, 50 years time, and that's still going on now. But I think, like, my idea is that it all comes down to comfort. Like, so it'll be interesting to get your thoughts on that, because like Kiwis don't want a bike because they've got this luxurious item of a car. Kiwis don't want to catch a bus because they've got this luxurious item of a car. Kiwis don't want to put themselves out of their comfort zone because they are comfortable in their luxurious quarter-acre section in Aotearoa. So I think that kind of gets back to the whole purpose of doing this podcast, because for me, traveling and getting out of my comfort zone in a country, or in countries, like we both went to Cambodia together, like going to countries which are so different to Aotearoa, good and, like, there's no good and bad. That's another thing. There's no good and bad. Countries aren't better or worse than Aotearoa. They're just different. Everything's just different. But you need to do that. You need to get out of your comfort zone and get out of Aotearoa to expose yourself to different ideas, and ideas that are based on like the lack of fancy, the lack of luxury. Because in the Netherlands, like, the sole fact that you ride a bike everywhere, then you might come back to Aotearoa and be like, I don't need my fucking car. I don't need this luxury item. Or you might not want to return to Aotearoa because in Aotearoa you do need a car because bikers are disrespected, there's no buses. But once you expose yourself to life without relying on such luxuries that we have in Aotearoa, and they are luxuries because like they're based on comfort. Whereas here when you travel, you expose yourself to different ways of doing things, and hopefully people listening to this can really understand how important it is to, like, it doesn't matter where you go in the world, just put yourself somewhere outside of your comfort zone. And being outside your comfort zone is literally as simple as leaving Aotearoa, because it doesn't matter where you go, as long as you're exposing yourself and embedding yourself in a different culture where they just simply do things differently. And that might start a revolution, because the more people who do that, the more people who start to understand how weird the ways and processes are in Aotearoa, how much we rely on luxury, and then it might start to change things. But it is because also, like, these countries are so old. So there's a greater understanding, like there's just a greater knowledge pool. Like, it's based on more history, so there's more history to learn from. Where in Aotearoa we're so young. Like, I can't think of Aotearoa beyond the 1900. Whereas all these countries have been like, around for so much longer, so there's more history to learn from. But yeah, it's just, I think and like a lot of the generation before us, the baby boomer generation, they're just loving life because they're as comfortable as it gets. Like, they've embraced all this new opportunity, all this new technology, and now they get to sit back in Aotearoa and just enjoy the comfort that they have created. But unfortunately for us, none of that comfort is good for us, nor is it good for the future.
No.
Because it hinders our... well, you only innovate, you only develop, you only come up with new ideas when you hit when you either get outside your comfort zone or you hit a point of struggle, where you have to create a new way to do this or do that. So we haven't been exposed to any of that, so we haven't had any need to innovate or any need to come up with something new, a new way of doing things.
Definitely, it's that thing that New Zealanders, or just not even New Zealand, just people in general, like they're in the first world especially, like they're happy with their little piece and they're doing fine, and that's fine. Their little nuclear family, it's all good, and so nothing's going wrong. So like immediately nothing's going wrong that they can see, so they don't feel compelled to help out or do anything more, because no one wants to rock the boat if you're smooth sailing. But the thing is, it will eventually catch up. It always will. Like, the earth is a finite resource, and you can't just treat it like shit and then expect nothing, no consequences. It might not catch up with you, might not catch up with your children, but your grandchildren, their children. So it'll eventually come back. And if you're selfish enough to ignore that and just want to live in ignorant bliss for the rest of your life, that's you're pretty shit, to be honest. But like, we don't. I think we're a bit more aware, especially our generation, that things are not going to get better or stay the way they were. Like, things are on the decline, and it's more important. It's so important. It's like vital to act now, rather than wait for a shitstorm to hit and then be left to pick up the pieces. Like, there's an analogy, like in America, how much money they spend on disaster relief with all the hurricanes and flooding and tornadoes and shit that go on in America, whereas the Netherlands, because they're so well rehearsed in like water management and with dikes and water flow and how to control flooding and all the floodgates and shit, that they've invested a shitload of money into that in the Netherlands, but America has used more money trying, in disaster relief in America, trying to clean up problems where it fucking always floods there. There's always been a natural, throughout my lifetime, I just hear about another hurricane, another disaster in America with flooding in the South. Like, yeah, it's cool when you all band together and help out your fellow American and everything. That's lovely, like a lovely display of human nature. But the government or the council, the state, they need to do something to prevent it. Prevention is so much more important and useful than putting a band-aid on it at the end and trying to fix it all up. And if you want to think about it in terms of money, you're going to save so much more money if you invest now into a longer, stable solution, rather than just trying to patch it up all the time. It's a waste of money, resources, and it costs people lives, which is the saddest thing. That people die all the time in these natural disasters, which sometimes is unavoidable, but you can, reduce that damage and the flow-on effect of a natural disaster if you put the right, precautions in place. And it's, I don't know what it comes down to. Capitalism. Fuck capitalism. No.
That's the on the fuck capitalism counter. Yeah, that's number 2.
I've refrained from saying it a few more times, but it's an easy dig to just say fuck capitalism, because capitalism has also helped so many things in the world and helped produce innovation and invention and the Industrial Revolution, and that getting more bang for your buck kind of thing, which has helped speed up processes around the world and allowed, created job creation and stuff, as well as taking it away, I guess. But there needs to be a balance. People are so anti socialism and all that shit, but you don't have to be one or the other. There's a middle ground always, where you can take the best of both worlds and create you know, a fully working, sustainable economy and country. It's like, I guess I don't know if it's me because I'm like a half caste or like I'm a mixed race person, that I've been aware that I am Samoan growing up in New Zealand, but I've also grown up as a New Zealander, and the ability to pull the things I like about each culture and create the type of culture I want is has been a powerful tool to realizing who I am as a person. But it's a skill that's applicable to so many other areas of life. There's, you know, the world's not black and white, and there's so much more opportunity for the world and humans to move forward as a species if we take the positives from everything and find a way to unite them into the best future that we can make. Yeah.
Well, it's like I'm not Māori, but so much of my grounding, and I've come to understand that so much of my like spirituality is based on like just straight up Māori concepts, like the connection to the land, the connection to you know, the mountains, the kai moana, the oceans. Like so much of my just general spirit is based on Māori culture. So I kind of feel you on that, and you can extrapolate that out to religion as well. Like I'm not overly religious, but I am overly religious because I take aspects of Christianity. I haven't taken anything specific from Islam, but I kind of have like certain food things or different ideas. Like there's a few Islamic Twitter accounts where like a central figure tweets out like just pure good vibration tweets based on, you know, Islamic teachings. So I kind of get those and draw those into my day-to-day being. So I like to think that I take good things from Islam as well. I take good things from Buddhism, from Rastafari, from atheism even. So like taking different aspects of, let alone astrology or the stars and the universe and just general spiritual consciousness, which to a closed-minded person would, like, if you're talking about you know, different dimensions, if you're talking about different dimensions, third dimension, fourth dimension, third eye, kundalini, if you're talking about that stuff to a person to a Christian person who goes to church every day, every Sunday, and is a strict Christian, they're going to think you're like some, you know, crazy lunatic. Or like some, you know, you're just completely ridiculous. But I take that and then take that in conjunction with Christianity, the good ideas from Christianity, Buddhism, and combine it all, and you can create your own religion. So even if you're using atheist concepts, that is your religion in a way. So the idea of taking different bits and bobs and like we wouldn't be here where we are now without capitalism and without a baby boomer generation that fully embraced capitalism 100%. But again, it's like our duty now to take the bits we want from that era and apply it to a new era where we have a different level of understanding of how things work, and to take, as you said, take all the good like bits we want and kind of use it to build our, for lack of a better term, our modern religion.
I think that's just it. As we've progressed as like in the first world, not the first world, but like, you know, modern times, especially all the big world countries now in the West, the Western world, we've become way more secular. And so I guess back in the day, everyone drew their values from religion and whatever, like the specific religion that you were brought up in your country. And so that provided all your values. And as we've moved away over the century, I guess, away from the church, as people had to find new places to get our values, or look inside ourselves and sort of create our own set of values that we think are good to live by, which can be hard for people who, some people still go to church because they need that sort of authority or someone to just say that, no, this is the right thing to do. But so many people nowadays, I think humans inherently have that moral compass, and you sort of know, maybe not inherently, but I guess it's the way you're brought up, because both my parents went to church when they were little, but I've never been to church in my life, which is kind of weird because my dad's Samoan, and he went to Catholic boys' school in New Zealand, and my mum was raised as a devout Mormon, but they've never sent me or my brother, or even my sister, to church, I think. But they've never told me that we couldn't go. They said, if you want to go to church, you can go to church. We're happy for you to do that, but we know that it's confusing. It's like, they know that, my mum goes, I know I'm a good person. I don't need to go to church to prove that to anyone, especially myself, but if other people need to do that, that's fine, for whatever reason they go to church. If it makes them happy and encourages them, motivates them to be a better person in society, then I'm all for it. But for me, as I'm grounded in myself, and so I have my set of values from all different sources, and that's the most important thing, rather than blindly following scriptures because someone told you to. Whereas if you actually fully believe in the words of Jesus Christ and the Bible or the Quran and all that, I don't know, like, if you fully believe that and it's how you want to live your life, cool. But like assigning yourself to one specific testament, it closes the door to so many other good opportunities, and it just, not everyone, but it can close your mind to so many other positive things that are out there in the world, which is probably my biggest pet peeve about religion. Is it's so, not all of them, and not especially as we've become more modernized, but there's a set of rules, and it's black and white for so many people, which I struggle because there's so many areas of grey in the world, and that's something that I'm not really sure I'm going with this, man.
How is because I know a lot of this stuff has been we've talked about a lot of this stuff before, when we were both at university or when we were both in Aotearoa, but how is your move to Netherlands kind of impacted the way you think about some of this stuff, in a very general sense? That's completely up to you where you go with this, but has there been something from moving to the Netherlands and experiencing how this culture operates? Because we have both traveled, we've both been tourists, and I think again it's important, yes, being leave Aotearoa, get out of your comfort zone and travel, but it's a completely different experience to live in a country. So you can be a tourist, but then you're only getting the tourist experience. So if you go to Hawaii and you're a tourist, you're going to stay in a resort and you're going to sit by the pool. Or if you go to Samoa or Fiji and you're a tourist, you're going to sit by the pool and you're going to enjoy the artificial reality of that nation. Whereas if you live in a country, or if you go off the beaten track, then you are experiencing the actual differences in culture of that country. So moving to another country and living in another country is super important on top of that. So how is living in Netherlands, this specific move to live in another country, like the Netherlands, how has that impacted, one or two examples of how that has impacted your just way of thinking or your belief system, or just how you view the world, how you view Aotearoa?
Coming to the Netherlands and actually trying to live here, or living here, I can say Amsterdam, it's still like, it's not super typical, but it's still like, it's a first world country, and there's a lot of international like businesses, multinationals and everything. So it's not far removed in that sense from New Zealand. Like, I feel quite comfortable here, but in saying that, it still feels so much different. The whole biking thing, language, like Dutch people, English is their second language, so everyone can pretty much speak English, especially in the main parts. But Dutch is still the first language, and people feel way more comfortable expressing themselves in Dutch rather than English, even though the English to us sounds, perfect, but to them they are struggling to talk to you in English, some of them. And then it's interesting because I'll go to like a $2 shop here, and then there's a Asian lady at the counter, but she speaks, I guess, Mandarin or Cantonese and Dutch. She doesn't speak English, which is like a really weird experience for me. Like, coming here and then seeing Asian, oh yeah, of course, they'll speak Chinese, Cantonese, or maybe they're Japanese. But when they don't speak English, like, it sort of freaks me out. And then I get this, the culture shock that, hold on, I'm not actually in New Zealand. I can't just expect everyone to speak English, despite Dutch people being very well versed in English. It's sort of that Eurocentric or like English-centric mindset that you think that everyone should be able to at least understand you speaking English, which is, it's been nice here because even though people speak Dutch here, a lot of people speak English, so it's been easier to get by. It hasn't been as hard as like going to Italy, where they're so Italian that they, or France, where they just speak French or Italian and they don't want to learn English because that's not their language. Why should they? Which is fair enough. But that's what I think has been nice about here. Instead of going to the UK or going to London and doing that typical OE bar experience, where it's almost just like you're going to traveling from New Zealand to New Zealand with different accents. Like, it doesn't seem as fulfilling for me. Just, yeah, because it's like, why would you not even just spend all that money, but travel halfway around the world to end up in a place just back home? Like, they drink heaps, they party heaps, there's drugs, everyone speaks English, all the good bands and stuff. But that's why it's nice being here in the Netherlands, because yes, the English thing is a bit easier because they speak it here, but it's a totally different culture. Like, the bike riding thing, I've touched on it a few times, but the Dutch people are very straight up, which is a bit harsh. It seems harsh at first, but it makes so much more sense. They're just, I guess it's about efficiency and none of this beating around the bush like New Zealand, like trying not to hurt anyone's feelings and sort of like, yeah, nah, like, am I going to do it? It's quite refreshing to have someone just be like, well, are you going to do it or not? Like, there's none of this wishy-washy thing, which was a bit hard at first because they're like, oh, what do you want to order? And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, you can have this or have this, like, And there's this one story my mate told me. He brought his New Zealand friend over, and the Dutch person was offering like a free sample or like free beer or something, and then the New Zealand friend was like, oh, no, it's all right, and he's like, no, take it, it's free, like, it's fine. And then she's like, oh, yeah, thing. And then she's like, the Dutch girl was like, I don't know how else to say that it's free, because that is what it is. Like, I'm not, there's no hidden agenda. Like, if I say it's free, it's because it's free, which has been quite nice over here. Like, as well as, I guess that's what my partner Haley, she's half Dutch, so she sort of has that intrinsically from being Dutch in her genetics. Like, if someone says something free, she's like, cool, she takes it. She doesn't question anything else. She loves free stuff. It's a real Dutch thing. Love like discounts and free stuff. But that's the other cool thing. I just thought about, like, there's so many like op shops here, and like upcycling of like clothes and even just secondhand goods. It's like the mentality over here, it's not frowned upon. Like, it's not what poor people do or like ulti kids do, going to shop at op shop. Everyone does it because it's cheap, it's good for the environment, like upcycling clothes that, so you don't waste it and like there's no stigma around it. Like, oh my god, you got that. You know, how much did that cost you? Like, if something's cheap, it's good over here because you saved the buck. Like, it's smart thinking, and you're like applauded for that rather than sort of, you know, look down. Not look, yeah, but I guess back home, you know, people will look at you funny if you like wearing like op shop clothes or like obviously op shop like tatty clothes. Mind you, the population here is so much bigger, so they got so much more nicer, you know, many more op shops with a lot more cooler stuff inside. But the fact that everyone does it and it's not just what poor people do, like to try and afford like decent looking clothing, is a real cool thing about the culture. Even people just leaving stuff outside by the bins, like fully working stuff or like a little bit broken. You know, it's like Haley picked up, she got a bag, like this funky looking like handbag thing that someone just left by the bin. Like emptied it out and just took it. But like they leave it there, I guess, some of them not to be lazy, but as to give, you know, a bag or a piece of clothing or, you know, something, another chance at life. It's so much more, I guess, rewarding and fulfilling, and knowing that it's not just going to be dumped in a junkyard and, you know, and just add to a pile of rubbish in New Zealand, that, or like wherever, and just keep adding to that, because, you know, there's only so much space that's eventually going to catch up. So isn't it more important that we, you know, we slow down this consumerist behavior that we have and sort of breathe life and reuse? You know, it's a bit environmentalist, but it's fucking true. Like, I'm so much more conscious of the environment and the world around us by moving away from New Zealand. And like the recycling here is crazy. Like they got, like, so we live in an apartment block. No, yeah, I guess apartment block. And so there's rubbish bins on the street where you can take your general rubbish. And there's also a recycling one for plastic, one for glass, one for paper. And they just give people the opportunity, and it's like people use them. I see like every type of person from every type of house putting stuff in the recycling. It's so cool, and it's just part of the culture, part of the territory of living here. Is if you want to live here, you recycle, which is, yeah, it's an amazing that everyone can just buy into that idea. And even at the supermarkets, if you take back beer bottles or like certain wine ones and stuff, you get money back, like, and you can get a discount off your groceries, like, and that's been around for ages. And I just saw a while ago this year that they're introducing one in Australia. Like, wow, it's been alive so long in Europe and been such a great thing, but you know, it's still like, to have one in Australia is like, wow, when we thought New Zealand and Australia were like on the cusp of the first world and shit. And it's like, there's so many things we could improve. Like, it doesn't just have to be good, it can be better. And I think that's what we miss out on in New Zealand, and I guess maybe Australia, but especially New Zealand. We're just so complacent and content with the way things are that you miss out on, innovating the country.
There's so many in so much in that I could tangent off, but there's many more podcasts to come on different ideas, like whether it's recycling, whether it's the living in, like, are there many buildings in Amsterdam? Like, is it mostly people living in apartments?
Yeah, they have those traditional Dutch houses, like straight up, like 3 stories most of the time. And we stay on the top floor of a 3-4 story building. We only have neighbors below. They're real big on like utilizing space by building upwards rather than outwards, which is, I don't know, it's pretty cool, especially on such a flat country that they've always thought about building up first rather than out. And it's, just reducing that footprint in the world, which is so forward thinking, instead of having a massive estate like back home on a big section.
Well, that's the same as Concepcion. Like, that's the reason I say it's for another podcast, because I think it applies a lot to the current like housing situation in Auckland. Like, Kiwis are so luxurious and so comfortable that the idea of not living in your quarter acre dream and moving and like families living in apartments is so different for Kiwis that this has created like a housing crisis in Auckland. So like we can go into plenty of depth there, but to kind of, I guess like we could move on to the innovation, because like I've been thinking a lot of how like the Kiwi foundation is built on exploration, and like we grew up, I'm not exactly sure like when the baby boomer era came about, but I think Sir Edmund Hillary, like he would have been like just before it. So the idea of Kiwis being this creative, or these crazy innovative explorer, pushing the boundaries sort of characters, which like for anyone listening, that is pretty much a facade these days. Like we're not like, other than the rich people's America's Cup race, which is completely ridiculous, but other than that, like we're not really pushing the boundaries in too many aspects compared to other countries during my lifetime. Like my lifetime has kind of been about like sitting still, like just being content with what we have, whereas my Kiwi spirit and my Kiwi knowledge of Kiwi history is based on exploration. Like even through my connection to Māori culture, it goes back into that. Like the Māoris came here via exploration. The Māoris came here via the desire to quench their, well, like even the idea of leaving Hawaii is based on leaving their comfort zone. Like they left their island to go off into the big ass ocean, and I don't like, there's nothing more leaving your comfort zone-ish than that. Like that is the purest example of leaving your comfort zone. And whether it's Sir Edmund Hillary going out to climb to scale the tallest mountain in the world, whether it's Kiwi Anzac soldiers going off to fight someone else's battle and represent our nation in something that didn't really involve us. Like how, like, I don't know what the question is, but the idea, like, do you feel that, like, at the crux of the Kiwi spirit, there is this desire to innovate, to create, to explore, to push boundaries that just hasn't really been at the forefront of Kiwi culture in the last, we're 25, 26 years old, so, during our lifetimes, a quarter of a century.
Yeah, I guess, technologically, the world has advanced, and that we've just sort of tied into being in the first world. But as New Zealanders specifically, not a lot, I feel. Quite a stagnant place at the moment, and living off past glories. It feels like that spirit has been dwindled. Like, man, Kiwis work so hard in New Zealand, or like the ones that do.
Internationally, we would be among the hardest workers in the world. Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Like the work ethic is really strong, which is really cool. But the amount of hours that we put into, like, especially for people on minimum wage, just trying to survive, like they work so hard, and it sucks because it feels like they're not really rewarded or respected, for the amount of effort, and it's become a norm to work, 60, 70 hours a week at a low skilled job, just because that's what you have to do, and they've just sort of accepted it as, as a way to survive. But it shouldn't be that way. It's really a lie, that people can work real hard in New Zealand and be successful, in some respects. It's a thing that I see a lot with Pacific Islanders, especially growing up. Like a lot of, yes, there's a lot of us that work in factories and, like low skilled entry level minimum wage jobs. But the fact that they do that and they can't progress anywhere in the country. Like they'll be renters for life, and they'll rely on their children to be successful, to live a better life. Like that they've done their part by getting their children to New Zealand as immigrants, and they just, it's like a cycle. They're a machine. They can't stop working because the household will break down, and there's no alternative. Like they can't just stop and upskill, or it's a trap, man. It's a danger. It's a sad cycle that a lot of low income earners face, which I think that middle New Zealand don't understand or comprehend, like the working poor, And when people make that comment like, oh, they just don't work hard enough, and they go, fuck, bro, the people that work in these factories or labor and shit, they're some of the hardest workers I've seen in my entire life, So it's not a question of, how hard they work. It's, it has nothing to do with it. It's so many other factors surrounding them. So it's a redundant argument, and I hate when people bring it up. It's like, you can't tell me that person who works, 70 hours in a factory isn't working as hard as the CEO of of this fucking bullshit ass startup. Like, get fucked.
Well, especially when like the same
capitalism.
job in Australia is monumentally more beneficial. Like,
Yeah.
why, if you're in that situation, why are you staying in Aotearoa? Like, obviously Australia's got a kind of weird immigration situation at the moment, but like you are, not only do you earn more money, you get more money working Sundays, you get more money working Saturdays, you get like just a better, and then from that, as you said, like it's not only like your job is finished because you have moved to Aotearoa and you have you can't, your job is finished because you can't progress yourself as an individual. You have created a platform for your children to progress and develop as humans, but you can't progress yourself. Whereas if you move to Australia and you're earning more money, you can, you've got more money to invest in your own business. You've got more money to support your family. You've got more money to enjoy your life. But that's the other thing, like,
time, bro.
There's a greater emphasis around the world in enjoying your life. Like,
Straight up, man.
I've got,
It's ridiculous.
this is another topic for another podcast, but like, I don't know, like I kind of get like, it could just be my Kiwi perspective, but there's like a lazy vibe to Chileans. Like there's like, if they, it's just like, to me it's just like lazy. Like, whether it's in sport, like they don't show up on time. There's like a no respect for punctuality. And again, like this is coming from Aotearoa, so it's a bit different, but they start their days later, but you could flip that laziness into just a view on, I'm not here to slave my life away. Like I'm here to like take time to enjoy my life. Whereas in Aotearoa, you don't enjoy your life because you work. Like that, it's as simple as that. Like, and then we wonder why we have such high like suicide rates. We wonder why we have mental health problems, and it's because like you're just stuck in this working hard bubble, and you're not like we're like millennials who, there's this perception about millennials not working hard. Millennials work fucking hard. We work harder than Joe Blow, 50-year-old white dude working in an office. We work bloody hard as well, but like it's what you get from that hard work. So we are working hard for ourselves. We are working hard, not necessarily, there's one thing, I think it's best summed up like, there's one thing to work hard for a paycheck, but then there's one thing to work hard for an opportunity, or there's one thing to work...
Sorry, bro, you're breaking up.
There's one thing to work hard for creating an opportunity. There's one thing to work hard for changing your situation. So it's, you can work 50, 60 hours a week, and that's the Kiwi view of hard work, is how many hours you're working, how much money you're making. Whereas like if you're a millennial, or if you're in a different country, you're working hard, but you're not working hard by those measurements.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with New Zealand, and it's that whole fucking capitalist thing, bullshit. Like everything it's all statistics, it's all numbers. You need a measure on things so that you can prove to people, you're making a difference. And everyone's just bought into that idea that unless you show me some stats are the fucking, like, they can be construed how many ways, like, and like just molded to support an argument. They're just stats, they're just numbers. Like, at the end of it, it's such a weak form to use to support an argument, especially with people, because it just dehumanizes people and it makes us another statistic. And it's easy, it's good in the sense that it gives businesses and people ideas on, productivity and levels like that. But when it comes down to people and, like, especially the education system, like, it shouldn't be like that, especially if you want, forward thinking, human beings, or just contributing members of society. They shouldn't be ranked and put against, like, a standard of you need to be reaching this by this. Like, humans are so much more complex than that, and that dehumanizing value that capitalism, I guess, or businesses have to, produce more profits from more inputs from less workers, kind of thing. It's really detrimental to society, and that's what forces people to work ridiculously long hours and give up their life because they have to survive, which is it's shit. Like, human beings shouldn't be treated like that. We're worth so much more than how many hours we can put into a week or how much work we can produce. We need to, like, almost go back in time to just where the quality of things was so much more important than the quantity. It's terrible.
Well, it's like, if you're with your mates, it's like, oh, how many hours did you work this week? And that becomes like a competition. It's like, gee, I worked 30 hours this week, and then another mate will be like, bro, I put in a big shift, I worked 45 this week, and then it's like 50, and it's like it becomes a competition. The conversation or competition is never like, bro, I had heaps of fun this week. Like,
it's just because it's an easy measure. Even for workers, it's an easy measure. It's like gratification to know that you've worked hard because you put in this many hours. Even my foreman at work was, he was one of the smartest dudes I know, but he was Tongan, and he still, like, he sort of took joy in putting in heaps of hours because, it was a way to show that his wife and his daughter that, hey, look, I'm working really hard. And then he's got something tangible he can take to the boss and say, hey, boss, I'm working really hard. Is it possible to work out some, pay rise or something? Because that's the type of system he operates in. And it just sucks because the people at the bottom who put in those long hours, proportionately, they don't share in the profits that the top cheese off everyone. Like, it's ridiculous how much the people on top take, like, proportion wise to the amount of effort and actual production of the product you're selling don't get. Like, the people who work in the warehouses in the factory, like, without them you would have nothing to sell. Like, stuff wouldn't happen. But they're not given a fair share of the profits because you think they're replaceable and they're just numbers, whereas the work that you do is so much more important. Your marketing and your advertising and your collating of bullshit numbers is so much more valuable to this company than the tangible product that you're trying to sell. It's like if people stop picking up the rubbish on the side of the road. How would people function? People aren't equipped to deal with a full bin after 1 week. So what do you expect them to do after going on strike for 2 weeks? It's just, everyone's so caught up in their little world and making sure they get more money and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the higher tiers of companies that work really hard, but it's so easy for them to forget, especially when they don't go down, like CEOs or business owners, managers who don't come down to the low levels and let people know that they're human as well, that it's so easy for them to just forget about let the workers who do the hard yards, like the physically hard yards, easy to forget them and just let them remain numbers or, just names on their payroll. That, it's fuck capitalism, man.
The innovation idea, I was just thinking like you were talking about the woman's right to vote and stuff like that. Like, we are like, I'm thinking like, what are we actually pushing the boundaries in? Like, what are we? Because it's not just pushing the boundaries and being innovative. It's like the way I view it, and like I come at it from like a legalizing marijuana like perspective. Like, Aotearoa could be at the forefront of the world in aspects of society, like legalizing marijuana, like women's rights, which shouldn't be like, women's rights shouldn't be a thing, or gay marriage shouldn't be a thing. They should just be ingrained in society. But for whatever reason, we're too retarded to have made that development in our world yet. So they are still things. But Aotearoa, like, instead of being where we are now, where we are not doing anything, and if we make any small move, that move is celebrated like we are God's gift to society, because we have a Māori language week. Like, okay, we have a week, like it should be every day, but that's an example of how we tokenize and celebrate these gestures. Instead of that, or not doing anything, we could be at the forefront of the world. Like, when I think of Aotearoa, and I think of this clean green image, for example, which is, clean green was built around Aotearoa being one of the cleanest, greenest nations in the world. So that is an example of Aotearoa leading the way internationally in that aspect of life. There is nothing which Aotearoa is leading the way in the world. Like, we're not at the forefront. We're not pushing the boundaries. We're not ahead of the pack on women's rights, gay rights. Like, we're not setting an example of how to treat Indigenous people either. We're not leading the world in recycling ideas. We're not leading the world in... We haven't even embraced legalization of marijuana. We haven't embraced fully going all in on sustainable living. We haven't, like, our farming perspective is terrible because we're viewed as this farming powerhouse, but that farming powerhouse is detrimental to society. And even then, like, if you want to get into a discussion about certain industries that Aotearoa is built on, like, it's not even beneficial for the farmer, because farmers they're not highly successful. Farmers are committing suicide. Like, how is that viewed as a positive? So, like, all these little aspects of life in Aotearoa, our country could be blazing a trail. And that's my expectation. That's my, again, as a Kiwi, that's my kind of standard. I view Aotearoa as a country that blazes a trail, because we're not confined to the ways of thinking of other countries, or we don't have that history. Like, we've got the benefit of being a young country. Like, we're not tied down by all this history. So we should be blazing a trail in so many different aspects of life. And, like, maybe some people around the world think we are, but we're not doing that at all. Like, we're stuck in the zone. And I think you only need to look at it like the reaction to having a female prime minister. Like, we're not like, not only are we not blazing a trail in terms of women's rights, in terms of empowering females, we are so far away, so far removed from blazing a trail that it's kind of embarrassing. So, like, in so many aspects of life in Aotearoa, we are not making any progress, and my personal standard is to blaze a trail. So there's a vast, so the embarrassment is, 100 times removed from blazing a trail. Maintaining the status quo is like 50 times removed from blazing a trail. So we're not even close to where my standard is of Kiwis leading the way and being an example to other countries of how to live a wholesome, beneficial for all lifestyle in our little slice of paradise in the corner of the world.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with everything you said. Like that, yeah, that's how I sort of feel as New Zealanders. We're pioneers by nature, but if now that I've left away and like been able to reflect on what does New Zealand actually do, what do we stand for, it's really, there's no evidence to support the argument that we still are that trend-setting country, you know, that world-leading. And I guess, you know, I just look back and I laugh because what really brought us into the first world in the first place was refrigeration. Because we're so far away from everywhere, like having good farms and shit was cool, but refrigeration, big blocks of ice cube on ships to transport meat, pretty much boosted our economy enough to pull us into the first world. But, you know, sort of from that time onwards, we're sort of, you know, sort of just dwindled. And, you know, yeah, we gave women the right to vote and we have mouldy seats in parliament, but it's all fucking just like tokenism. It doesn't, you know, what does it actually mean? And then so busy, like fucking Pacific Island cultures, nations fighting each other over burning flags in New Zealand. Like, so much trivial shit goes on in New Zealand that we've lost sight of where we could actually be as a nation and forward thinking, and so worried about, you know, house prices dropping and the value of the stock market and, you know, our trade partner agreements that, you know, we've sort of given in to the big superpowers of the world rather than standing on our own 2 feet and be like, nah, we want to go this way, you know? Just like, you know, it's like Australia, like looking us to America, like, like it's true though, like, you know, like, yeah, I need to stop saying like, but Australia, to me, it feels like they draw so much of their inspiration from America and the way they handle things. I mean, the fact that they're having such a massive debate about legalizing gay marriage is ridiculous, especially like our neighboring like continent, like almost. It's like a redundant argument that I can't believe that in 2017 people are being questioned about this in government. Like, it's how far, it's sort of a slap in the face to how far they think they've gone forward in society when they're still having problems about people being gay and getting married in a country. It's funny because over here they have the Pride Festival for like gays, lesbians, transgenders, you know, androgynous and just asexual people and whatever. Like the fact that there's a church here near Anne Frank's house, and they have a massive rainbow pride flag hanging down from the church. Like, if that's not a juxtaposition of, you know, a country who's, you know, well aware of what human beings, you know, that human beings are such complex and diverse creatures, and, you know, we're all different but we're all accepted. You know, a church, you know, having a pride, you know, a gay flag hanging off it, like in one of the most touristic places in the city. It's pretty cool to see that. And I'm just like, why can't New Zealand be open to things like that? Like, what is the real issue? A bunch of people who, you know, get butthurt when you talk about gay people getting married? Or that's in Australia, but, you know, there's so many undertones of things that people get hurt feelings over in New Zealand, where in the scheme of things it really doesn't matter to you, especially what, you know, other human beings want to do, get married, and whatever they do in their own house is up to them, just like whatever you do in your house is up to you. It's really none of your business. And
we always hold ourselves to like such a high moral standard compared to Australians. Like, that's the weird thing, is like we, like, especially with our treatment of Māori, for example, we always, it's all like, oh, well, we do a better job than those Aussies, and it's like, yeah, okay, but like, we judge, like,
a terrible
like are we really? B,
Yeah.
what's our standard? Stop worrying about Australia's standard, USA's standard, England's standard, which are three countries. You said Australia looks USA's nuts. Well, New Zealand
Exactly.
is basically the yes sir to those three countries. Instead of being our own country and saying nah, these are our morals, these are our values, we are trailblazers, we are innovators. Instead of doing that, we say, oh, that's what you're doing? Okay, we're going to do that. Yeah, sure. We're not innovating, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But unless you got someone else to add there, Brad, we'll wrap that up.
That's good from me, mate. Good from you too.
The Silly Kiwi Millennial Podcast, episode 1. Tell a friend, tell a homie that we're out here fucking spreading just inglorious amounts of information and wisdom.
Yeah. And up the tour.